Well, I think there's still a major problem that there's a disconnect. A lot of people still consider forestry to be damaging. They're still back looking in perhaps the 60s and 70s when perhaps we weren't being as sustainable in our practices as we certainly are now. Right now, I think if most jurisdictions would consider our jurisdiction to be sort of a leading edge in terms of sustainable forestry practices. So I think we've got a very good record to tell. And I think we need to do a better job in telling it.
When you think of where forestry was and where it's going, you know, even in my day, when you came into call it an urban center and you identified yourself as a forester, you were kind of not. People assumed that you were the guy out there cutting down all these trees, and not the guy out managing the forest, and not the person out managing the ecosystem for the benefits of Ontarians. And so I see the changes in that now, where, again, people need to be more aware of what foresters are. I mean, foresters are probably one of the first ecologists that we ever had, an environmentalist. And I look at all of my forestry colleagues as environmentalists. And so when you look at the career opportunities and seeing and talking to young people, and certainly that interest in the environment is there, you say forestry is a perfect career to pursue, your environmental ambitions. You are working with people, you are explaining how to protect values, you're protecting the biological integrity of our landscape, and at the same time you're working on developing a renewable resource.
I think it's evolved by necessity. I think the last decade has been a bit of an eye-opener for many. The demise almost of print has forced folks to sort of rethink where they have their business and where they need to go. I think the opportunities that are going to come in the next decade are going to be that next generation of wood products, building it into something like cross-laminated timber. We've just gone through a building code change where we're allowing 4 stories to go to 6. Around the world, there's examples of 12 stories out of wood. So I think the evolution is sort of coming by partly by necessity and what sort of happened out there in the environment, and partly by adopting new ways of doing things and sort of taking the product up the value chain.
Cross-laminated timbers, another product that's come into the Canadian market the last couple of years, and we're already seeing some buildings. The new University Laurentian School of Architecture in Sudbury is actually a demonstration project and will feature cross-laminated timber. But again, that opens a whole new way of building. We're looking at right now some demonstration projects going even higher than 6 stories, but this can provide up to double, if not more, 2.5 times more wood consumption in Ontario than what we're currently seeing. So that's a big market opportunity right here in Ontario.
One of the myths about forestry that should be broken is that forestry destroys forests. But the reality is that sustainable forest management is all about producing habitat, conserving biological diversity, and managing the forest in a sustainable way over the long term. Forestry is a very technical, science-based field. It's governed by a wide variety of policies, guidelines, laws, manuals, and so on, and all of that has a scientific basis.
Your projection in forestry, in all facets of forestry, is you're thinking 15 to 20 to 30 years ahead. Like the 50 to 75 year view, yeah, that's what you're thinking all the time. No professions do that, where it's like I'm thinking what's going to happen 75 years all the time as I'm spraying trees. And when I put in a group opening, to try and encourage red oak or black cherry or white ash or some type of species that won't grow unless it gets the light, I create that opening. I'm thinking, okay, great, we're going to have something 40, 50 years. We'll likely get some cherry in here, which is going to feed animals. It's going to create cherries. We're going to get some oak in here, which is going to feed the deer. This is how you're thinking all the time to kind of massage that forest into a better forest.
I think that people think that we, especially in Ontario, we just go out there, we do whatever we want. We want trees, we cut them down, we go to the next forest, we cut it down. They don't understand all the planning that's involved. One of our programs, we go out, we take students into the field, they get to meet the people that go through the planning, and they're always surprised by how much planning is in place. And the word sustainability is constantly used by these planners, by these forest managers. Trees grow back. Within our lifetime, they grow back. So there's that misconception of sustainability, and if it's a natural ecosystem and we destroy the natural ecosystem by doing forestry, that it's gone, that it's no longer there, that we're disconnected from it and we're just doing whatever we want. And it's not like that in Ontario. We take very good care of our forests, and I wish people would understand that, or would take the time to really understand the amount of effort that goes into the things we do in Ontario. It's world-renowned.
Urban forestry is a lot like traditional wildland forestry. You're looking at trees as individuals and assessing them, and you're also looking at trees as part of the ecosystem that they exist in. In urban forestry, obviously humans, the cultural and community component is a larger factor in that ecosystem, but you're still looking at water cycles, at wildlife, at the impacts on surrounding trees, at everything. So you're still looking at them both as individuals and as part of that holistic environment. It's also critically important as we become more aware of things like sun exposure and skin cancer, especially on school grounds and parks where children congregate, things like that, production of oxygen, cooling the urban heat island effect that we're getting. So again, they're just critically important for a lot of the same benefits they provide in the wild, but when you've got paved surfaces and bigger concentrations of humans, they actually become almost more important to a degree.
With what we've lived through in the last 10 years or so, the industry lost a lot of jobs, and at the community level, you know, it's a pretty hard sell to suggest to your children that they go into the forest industry when you yourself have lived through that tremendous change. There's this really interesting emerging future for the sector. It's got great momentum, and it will be a sunrise industry, not a sunset industry.
For young folks, there's certainly going to be an opportunity because a lot of the folks that are in there now are in their 50s. So there's going to be those jobs in the bush if somebody's interested in not sitting in a office environment and being strapped to a desk. Forestry is probably a great opportunity to get out there in the outside environment, make a good living at it, make a difference.
There's a lot of opportunity. I find on my work crews that I oversee, and the average age is 50-something. A lot of those guys are in their 60s now. Good loggers are hard to find now because they are aging. It's hard work. It's very rewarding because what you're doing is a very rewarding type of work.
Forestry is not just, you go in and you cut trees. You go in and you could be a biologist contributing to forestry. You go in, you could be a chemist that's going to be, creating the next new wood product. You can go in, if you love video games, you can be the person that's running the logging machine. So there's a range of possibilities. And the thing about forestry is you don't have to have the university degree to get somewhere. You can have a college degree. There's jobs for right out of high school. It's such a range of possibilities for a range of skills and people who want to go to school, people who don't want to go to school. The job is out there. You could work in a mill. You could work in the forest. You could work in an office. I mean, it's really, there's such a range of possibilities and people are not aware of it.
And so our forest management planning process engages multiple stakeholders through the whole planning of the forest management plans for Crown Forests in Ontario. It brings their values to the table. There's methods and systems in place to address their values and ensure they're properly protected, and that's all incorporated into a forest management plan. So I see the evolution as from what used to be called a timber management plan to a forest management plan, when all these other values are being considered, biological things, values being protected, wildlife features being protected, all those different things are now incorporated in a forest management plan. And at the end of it is, here's the wood available for the forest industry. and to maintain that forest industry, and again, an extremely important industry to Ontario.
And there was a phrase that Marie Strong said, and that is, the future sustainability of the planet will largely be won or lost in the major urban centers of the world. And what he's getting at is, if we can reconnect people to nature and the fact that we need to live within the means of nature, the goods that it provides, the services that it provides, we've got a real healthy chance of having, a wonderful future for ourselves, our grandchildren, and seventh generation hence. But if we continue to be disconnected, then the outlook is rather bleak. So if we can reconnect that population and make that case, and if people start demanding more from from our governments in terms of what is your sustainability platform for the future, if they start demanding more from business in terms of, as consumers, we would much prefer to buy from something that we know is produced using sustainable green processes, so to speak, then all of a sudden I think we really have a hope for a much brighter, a much more sustainable future for all of us. It all comes down to an informed and caring electorate, and informed and caring consumer base. The control's in our hands. We just need to unleash that understanding, unleash that enlightenment, and unleash that passion. And if we do that, I think we have a hope for the future.